What's going on, everybody? How you doing? And I say everybody in jest. Uh, hold on. I say everybody in jest because I know there's only a couple of you in here, and I got to find the chat stuff. There we go. I did have it popped out, but in my idiocracy, I guess it disappeared somewhere, and I got to find it. There it is. Aha! Hey, Lori, how you doing? So, yep, I know I don't, and I haven't done too many videos or I haven't done too many streams or anything. Um, Life's been crazy, so let's not worry about that. I really wanted to talk about why I've been so non-existent, I guess, in the community, or as far as being on top of the YouTube stuff. Mainly, it's because I've done a lot of work in my fish room and changing over tanks, resetting things. I'm trying to really work on some of my strains that I've created and trying to get them really fine tuned as far as stabilized the patterns. I'm getting really close. So if you've paid attention or watched any of my recent videos, you've seen the ones where I'm discussing my Black Galaxy shrimp. Those have been pretty much the top of the priority list as far as the shrimp that I'm taking care of and the shrimp that I'm really being selective about. The next ones are my PRLs, which are doing great, but I haven't done as good of a job as far as selecting and separating to the different grades. The main thing I want to talk about with all of this is filtration. And that's a big topic in the community. It's a big topic with aquarists on, the right appropriate type of filtration to use. When it comes to shrimp, it's all about whether you're using active or inactive substrate. Hey, Debs, how you doing? Good to see you. Um, so I've kind of had this thought going for several years now. If you go back to some of my videos that I did 3, 4 years, I think it was 3 years ago, when I was still working with Jason at the shop, um, and I started doing videos about the best filtration for shrimp. And I kind of have to go back and edit those or reword it because at the time I was really into under gravel filtration. And I had also in the video had done a little spotlight on a box filter that I was looking into. That was the beginning of this whole idea. And it goes all the way back to when I first started doing research on filtration for shrimp. Everybody was talking about double sponge filters. That's the best way to go. Double sponge filters. So that way shrimplets don't get sucked up into the filtration. It creates a nice bacteria. Matin filters, that was another one. Again, purely sponge and water flow filtration type stuff. And then, of course, everybody recommended a deep substrate of whatever active or inactive substrate that you're using, typical aquarium setup. So when I started looking into the Asian under gravel filtration boxes and systems that is pretty much standardized across the hobby for shrimpers, as far as I know on the other side of the world, they use it heavily. On the US side, it's half and half, but a lot of people use the under gravel filtration system where they may put a partition in their aquarium that's about 4 to 6 inches, and they put the under gravel filtration plates and line them up and then fill it with substrate and use that. And no substrate usually, or just a thin layer on the front part of the tank. So I tried, of course, my way of thinking is how can I accomplish that same thing without modifying my tanks? I don't want to try to present something to people that is overly complicated. So got my mind thinking, got me really working as far as what I wanted to do for me. And I started off with undergravel filtration. I've always been a huge fan of just the undergravel filter plates. Sometimes I'd use a hang on back filter instead of just air. I'd use a power jet sometimes. Hey, Barbara. Hey, Prodigal Aquarist. Prodigal Aquarist. Okay. Anyways, so I combined all of those different things and I came up with what to me is the filter box method, which has really combined all of the different filtrations. It combines the sponge filter, it combines the active substrate or not, and you can put whatever you want on the rest of your tank. You can put sand, you can put substrate, you can leave it bare. So that's kind of where I've gotten to. The big question has been lately from a lot of breeders across the country. They hit me up on messaging and ask me questions, what do you recommend? How should I set it up? And it's so hard to explain how simple it is. And it's very effective. So that's why I did this topic. That's funny. I'm just reading all the chats, but it just blows my mind because I have a hard time explaining it to people because I've done it now for so long. It's been pretty much 2 years that I've been doing it in my aquariums and resetting my tanks and switching over, removing substrate and getting into this. And does filtration matter? I believe it does, and not necessarily a certain way. Not like you don't have to do it my way. You don't have to do it his way or their way. Do what works best for you. And that's basically what I've done is this works best for me. If I want to move shrimp from one tank to the other, I no longer worry about setting up my tank and letting it run for 3 to 4 months before it cycles. I pretty much now am to the point to where I don't recommend you do it until you're comfortable, but I do it now to where I'll set up a brand new filter box and in an aquarium that's already running, that has shrimp in it, I'll pull out the old ones and put in the new ones. And that's my reset. Done simple. If I take a tank and empty it out completely, I'll put a filter that's a dirty one that's been run for 3-4 months in another tank, and I'll put that one in the tank. I'll run it for about 3 or 4 days, and then I'll put a brand new fresh one in there and throw shrimp in. That quick. So it's one of those things. Now, we always have in the back of our mind, whether we want to admit it or not, is this setup that I have, is it good enough for my fish, shrimp, plants, and everything to survive? And I think most of the setups and everything that we do, yes, our shrimp, our fish, our plants will survive and they'll look good. But do they thrive? And I haven't been able to for sure answer that question yet, but I'm pretty certain and I feel pretty confident that the way that I have my tank set up has really made my colonies thrive. And the reason I say that is because I'm constantly taking tanks down and refilling them and throwing shrimp in because I have so many. I mean, you can see in this tank right here, this was from this aquarium down here, and they got too many, what I thought was too many in that tank and too much moss. So I moved them over here. I didn't do any kind of acclimation. I didn't do any kind of setup. Temperature from this tank to this tank were identical. TDS from this tank to that tank were identical. So I cleaned out the water, got rid of all of the gunk on the bottom, filled it back up, got the TDS where I needed it, and then after a day or two, I threw shrimp in there. So ask some questions, talk about what do you guys experience in, like, let's say your setup. You know, what do you run across? Do you see that your tank is surviving? Or do you feel like your tank is thriving? Are your fish, you know, breeding? Are your plants self-propagating and just blooming? Is the water clear? Do you have any, you know, all the things that are combined? Now, I truly believe that the way that I got it, and this is just for me, this is my personal preference. I don't want people just to do it just because I said so, because that defeats the purpose. I would like for, if you decide to go this way, kind of go through the process first of understanding why you're doing it. And that's why I think I'm so confident in the way that I do it, because it was a learning process for the past 2-3 years of what's my personal preference, what is the standard in the community, what is available to people. And by finding the stuff that's available to me, my filter boxes, once I found those, I was sold. Then I tried different substrates. I tried Biostratum from Fluval. I tried Fluval. I tried Brightwell. I haven't tried Akadama yet. And I don't think ADA Amazonia is really on the market anymore. Okay, so here's a comment. Let's look at it. Let's read it together. Oh, wrong one. I got to do it on the YouTube side. I mean the StreamYard side in order to see it. Okay. So my Neos are just hanging in there. My tap water runs from 6D KH to 15D degrees. For those that don't know, KH tap nitrates are 38 ppm, but plants help with that. When the tap KH is high, I cut in RO with tap water. Yeah, yes, I get it. I do that with my Neos a lot of times where because I only use RO water to fill my tanks. But for my Neo tanks, I will go get a couple of giant glassfuls of tap water, treat it with prime, and then put it in the water because I want to raise the KH up a little bit. The point is that, and I'll show you here in a minute, is that because of, I don't know why. I can't explain it. I don't know the sciences behind it. And to be honest, when I see stuff that tells me my tap water, this KH, this 15 degrees, 30 ppm, blah, 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 I choose not to process that type of information. Why? Because that was my biggest mistake when I first started keeping shrimp, was chasing parameters. So I don't do that in any way, shape, form, or fashion. I, like Benotsky says, could you simplify to start shrimp tank? Yes. And that's kind of what I've done. And that's a good one too. That's Glass Garden. Doesn't leach ammonia like ADA soil. And that's the biggest thing with the setups. Okay, now I've seen some shrimpers from across the pond that are testing adding ammonia to the tank to help it cycle. And I know that back in the day when I first started, I had run across Dr. Tim's stuff, and I had an account with him because I wanted to understand his cycle setup, you know, where you add ammonia intentionally into the water and you go through the process so that way it'll start the cycle, boost the cycle process. And so that's the big thing with, hey, Essie, that's the big thing with aquarium setups, right? It's the cycle. And so if you use something like ADA Amazonia and it leaches a lot of ammonia, then yeah, you have to go through a 6 month period of waiting for all of that to balance out to where it starts the regular normal cycle. One of the things that I found interesting watching, yeah, version 2 wasn't as bad as the original. But I don't think they're selling ADA Amazonia anymore. I think it went kerplunk. So a lot of people across the pond stockpiled it because I don't think they're making it anymore. I thought I saw something about that. But again, my intent is not to help people reach master breeder level, but to help people feel comfortable just getting into shrimp and with the stuff that we have, with the stuff that's readily available to you at your fish store, like Fluval. And so I'm not affiliated with Fluval in any way. They don't sponsor me in any way. It's just what I've been using since I started because that was the first soil that I saw in the pet store that said shrimp. Okay, that's what happens when you're just learning about active substrates. I've been an aquarist for 50 years. But active soils and substrates and lowering pH and all that was never an issue because I just had guppies, mollies, some plecos, maybe some cories. I was a regular fish keeper. So the reason why I think this makes cycling a tank so much easier is because of the same reason why they prefer to use the undergravel filtration. Right? If your substrate is sitting at the bottom of your tank, 2 inches, 3 inches deep, then it creates like a cap, right? And all of the ammonia that's at the bottom of the tank is just sitting there. There's nothing flowing through it to help it get into the water column and start cycling. So then that's why you have to wait so long for all of that substrate, however deep you put it, you have to let it what's the word what is the word in cooking, you have to let it marinate. Okay, and when it marinates properly, then all of that is in the water column and it helps the cycle. You don't have too many, but then you also have the worry of, well, don't disturb the substrate because it creates ammonia spikes. Why is that? Well, because it's so deep. And I think the undergravel filtration system helps keep water flowing through it. Ferment, yeah, ferment, that's another word. Marinate, ferment. But once you have water going through it, then the flow helps pull that ammonia into the water column so that it is actually it's activated and helps the cycle process. So yes, and that's undergravel filtration boxes, and that was my big thing. But I didn't want to have to modify my tank. I didn't want to have to go cut glass and then try to share it with people. This is the right way to make a box that fits the ISTA filter plates that cost you $16, right? And then I have a little bit of an issue with undergravel boxes because you put 3, 4, 5, 6 inches of substrate in there. Are you sure you're getting proper flow? Or is the bubbles going through your tube, just going through your tube and not pulling anything? And the reason I ask that is because I have plenty of experience with undergravel filter plates. And I've always noticed that if the air's not adjusted right, you start getting this little battle between the two sides. And it's not pulling water through the substrate, it's just bubbling. Okay, it's a very fine adjustment that you have to get right to where you know it's pulling water out evenly from both sides. So when I see an undergravel filter box, maybe a 6x6, maybe a little bit 6 inches tall, 6x6x6, right? And they have 4, 5 inches of substrate, I'm That's what made me think, is it really pulling all of that water flow through the substrate? And when I see that most of the setups, even using under gravel filter boxes, they tend to still cycle the tank for 3-4 months. Sometimes you don't have 3-4 months to wait, and you don't want to wait. What's the difference between an under gravel filter box and just a filter mesh sock with active soil in it? The difference is the same thing as I was saying about substrate being at the bottom of your tank. There's no flow through it. There's nothing pushing water to flow. It's kind of, think about a tea bag. If you put a tea bag in your aquarium, it's going to start leaching out the color, right? And slowly, if you put that tea bag inside your filter box or inside your hang-on back filter, it's going to push all of that stuff through, and it's going to be flowing in your water column. So that's why I think a filter box gives you a little bit of an advantage, because it's not just in a pot with a plant in it. It's not just inside of your under gravel filter box this deep, with maybe in the center part, maybe you have 2 of them, or maybe you have a whole wall and you have several plates. Is it really flowing through all of it? I wait 24 hours to cycle a tank, but I've been doing it over 50 years. They're your absolute favorite. Yeah, I know, Matt. Ever since I was a kid, I've been using it. So it's kind of one of those things. I guess us older people sometimes tend to rely on that older technology, because in reality, that older technology kind of really works. You're welcome. And that's kind of my whole concept was all of that thinking. Now I put all of that because when I reset my shrimp room up 2.5 years ago in here, I was a little overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed at the number of tanks that I had, how much substrate I was going to consume doing my setups. It was going to be a lot. It would have had to have been at least a dozen 16-pound bags, right, of substrate. For fluval, that's about $50 a pop. That's way too much money already. $800 worth of substrate, right? So that was an issue. And I was always intimidated by bare bottom tanks, so I didn't want to go there. So I kind of just went to the old sponge filter method. I set up my tanks, and I had a layer of substrate, and I waited a month or 2 months before I even started putting shrimp in them. Hello, how you doing? So in the process of doing all this and doing the setup, that's when I started realizing what's a cheaper way for me to do this and a faster way, because I don't really want to wait that long. So I did. I switched over. I tried it in one tank, and I put a small one, and I put substrate in it, and I started running it. And then one of my shrimp, and I had very few shrimp at the time. I had maybe a dozen PRLs, and one of them, I was watching it, and then next thing you know, it kind of just did this and did a couple of little shakes, and then bloop, went upside down, and it was full of berries. So I remembered, boom, I have a this egg tumbler that I've never used. I don't have an open aquarium except for this one that I'm testing out the sponge filter. So I put the egg tumbler in there with the eggs. Lo and behold, I had about 30 shrimplets come out of it. They were all healthy in that tank with just the sponge filter box, no substrate on the bottom. And it made me go, okay, if I can hatch shrimp and they survive and grow out in a tank doing this, I need to start thinking about switching over. So I did. And at first I had a couple of problems, maybe because I didn't use the right type of substrate. Brightwell is too small. I already know that. So you have to, if you do get bright well, use the larger granules. You want to stick with the larger granules, 3 millimeters and above. If it's too dense or too small, it becomes too dense. It reduces the amount of time that it will have proper flow. And that's a big one. And because it only takes about 2 cups, 2.5 cups of substrate to fill one of those boxes, you're going to have a bag, like I have a bag of substrate, 8-pound bag of substrate that I've been using now for 3 months. And when I switch out one of my filter boxes, I fill it up and I go. Wow, you're setting up 21 shrimps for tanks, 21 tanks for shrimps right now. I get it. And it becomes expensive if you try to put all the dollars to it, how much substrate you're going to be using. So this, to me, it simplifies the entire process, simplifies and shortens the cycle time needed. Now, I cheat, okay? I'm not going to try to tell you I don't. I cheat, whether it's using filters that I have in other tanks and putting them in, whether it's taking big old mosses and throwing them in the tank to get some bacteria in it, whether it's taking water from another tank and putting it in. I just saw a video from KW Shrimps, Kevin Wong, and he was talking about some of his secrets, and that's what he says. He says, I just use water from another tank, I fill it up, and then I put the shrimp in. And I was like, well, okay, so I don't feel like a dumbass for doing it myself. If a master breeder of his caliber is doing it, well then, yeah. And yes, you can put peat in those filters as well. I've done it. I don't like using the peat as much. It's cheaper, way cheaper, but I don't like using it as much because when you change out your filter box, the peat is messy. It's nasty. So yeah, it's easier for substrate because despite what some people may think, you can use your substrate. If it's good substrate, 2-3 years later, when you go to get rid of it, it's not going to crumble up into dust. If it does, it's bad substrate. I'm sorry, I got to tell you, you were using bad stuff. And I've had that happen before, to where it just turned to dust and it was mud. So yeah, I don't mess with that. Yeah, peat makes a big mess. Yeah, they're not very expensive. I was looking last night on Amazon, as a matter of fact, and a 3-pack is like $24. So it basically boils down to $8 a filter. And so far I haven't had any issues. You can also get them from Temu, and I think they're a lot cheaper on Temu. I just don't mess with Temu much. I did once, and I got a couple of things, and it was just kind of, it's kind of like buying stuff from Ross. And I don't know if from across the pond you understand that, but you go to Ross to buy name brand stuff that's not good, or it's got a messed up seam, or the zipper doesn't zip up all the way on the pants, but it's Levi's jeans, it's just the rivets are missing or something silly like that. So I kind of found that the same thing with Temu, but I've only ordered twice from Temu, so I'm not the most expert opinion. But yeah, it's Barbara, let's see. I'm trying one more time with shrimp, 3rd time now. But this time it's in a very established tank that's marinated for several years now. Neos. That's good. And I've probably had more issues with my Neos than I have with my Caradinas. I couldn't tell you why, but I think it is a lot because I use RO water, and because I don't really chase parameters. So I'm not trying to add KH and this and that. And no, I like to keep it shrimple. Sorry, that's why it's there on the bottom of the screen, keeping it shrimple. So, but what I have discovered is that, and I don't know if it's just me, but I'm pretty confident. And at Aquashella a few weeks ago, last month, whenever it was, I gave somebody 5 of my crystals, and she says, I only keep Neos. And I was like, but you live in Arkansas, right? And she said, yes. And your water is soft out of the tap. It comes out about what, 60 TDS maybe? She goes, yes. How'd you know? And I was like, because I used to live in Arkansas for a little bit. The water is horribly soft, which is a good thing for Caridina. But if you try to raise guppies and neos, you have a hard time and you got to add calcium to help it. So I told her, I said, take these shrimp. I raise them with my neos. They breed with my neos. Take them, put them in your tank. They'll survive. If they don't, let me know and I'll replace them. And I got a message from her last night, as a matter of fact, that they're doing great. And she's loving them because having neos and Caridinas in her tank, it just makes them more vibrant. So I'll show you the tank one of the tanks that I got them from. Let's see. So if you see here, let's see if I can get it to focus. I have blue neos. Woo! And some crystals. Now, what's cool is the crystals are breeding. I don't know if that's the one that's got berries. I have 3 of them. I don't know how they got in here. So that's kind of one of those things that I didn't do this intentionally. I must have moved moss from one of my tanks and I put them in here. And yes, in the back is the sponge filter box. There is no substrate in it. I used it just as is because it was for neos. Do I know what my KH is? No. Do I know what my pH is? Nah, it's probably around 6.5, just like every other tank. TDS on this one is probably around 200 because I have neos in it. But the main thing is that here's one of my tanks, and I only have 2 shrimp in here, a male and a female. And I can tell that these are starting to need, probably I'm going to have to reset them soon just because the flow. All right, here's another one. This one I only have 1 box in it, but I have a lot of my black galaxies. These are my culls, and there's some awesome, amazing looking culls. But these are mostly females. There's a few males, and a lot of them are about to spit out a bunch of babies. This tank I need to reset. If you can see the filter boxes, I've had those filter boxes in there for about 8 months. And it's time to reset. Again, water flow. If you see the one on the right side versus the one on the left, it's 2 different flows. So that's telling me that it's pretty clogged up. It's time to change it out. And then this tank, I just did a reset on the filters. I pulled out the old ones and I put in the new ones without taking out the shrimp. I didn't need to. I wasn't worried about it. And these are pretty much all males in here. I think there's 1 female. Then let's see here. Let's go over here. These are my latest setup with 1 filter box and 1 double sponge filter. Why? Because I already had the double sponge filters. So I just took out the substrate and put a thin layer and then added the filter box. They're hiding in here, but there's 4 purple metallic shrimp in here. I did some separating from my 2-year project, so now I have black galaxies in a lot of my tanks. Here's one of my PRL tanks, double sponge filter box, thin layer of substrate, because I like giving the shrimp something to, graze on. Some of my tanks have a little bit of substrate, some of my tanks do not. Here's one that does not have any substrate. Again, I just reset this one a couple of days ago and threw some shrimp in there. No cycling. I don't think I really needed it because pretty much this tank that filter has been in there for 2 years, the sponge filter. So all I did was change out the water, squeeze the sponges out a little bit, and then voila. Then down here, another tank of black galaxies. These are my diamondback galaxies. Um, this has been set up for quite a while now. And it did go through a little bit of a cycling process because I did it from scratch. But the shrimp are thriving. All my shrimp are thriving. Here's another one. I'm doing some work with these Subwassertang bushes. They're actually, the Subwassertang is attached to some driftwood. I just haven't trimmed it yet. And then this one has all of the blue steels that have been coming from the black galaxies. Some of them are like golden, kind of. They're yellowish, orangish, bluish. It's pretty cool. And then down here was my 2-year project. There's not quite as many adults in here anymore because I've separated them and pulled them out into all their tanks. But it's definitely thriving. There are so many babies in there, and there's no substrate. So what do you think? Let's see here. I'm looking over here. So what do you think? Any comments about what you see? Questions? Because it works. It works, and it works well. It's easy. There is very little mess with these. The biggest thing is that the tall sponge filters, the large, because they have a large and a small. The small is just one, the bottom portion, and the large has 2 portions. The large ones have holes on the bottom, so when you pull it out, it will drop stuff, gunk, whatever out of it, but it's not that bad. What I do is I take a little container, and when I pull it out of the aquarium, I put it in that container and I let it drain into that container. I may do a little bit of a water change, but not a whole lot. So that's how that works out as far as that. And again, big question is, do they thrive or do they just survive? Well, I think they thrive because every tank has buried shrimp. There's shrimplets everywhere. A lot of them you can't see because they're so tiny. But I've been so impressed with the way that it's worked and the success that I've had that all my tanks are being switched out. Every one. I'm just going to go to that for the most part. I do have a hang-on back filter that I use on occasion, and sometimes I get a bacteria bloom, and I don't know why it came, because I'll have an identical setup right next to it and it's fine. When that happens, I use the hang-on back filter and I run it for a couple of days, clears up the water, and then I move it to another tank.